Hello,
Hmm.
everybody. Today we have a big pleasure to receive Robert Potter here in our channel. It was a big surprise after releasing the conversation with Eduardo Munoz. Robert reached out and I saw the material that he's been producing along his career, and it was a really impressive amount of stuff and the deep of the stuff that he produced in many languages. Also is interesting because usually we see most of the good stuff in English. Of course, we are trying to do this to change it in Brazil. I have translated some books, written some stuff in Portuguese, but in average, the best stuff are in English because it's the official language even for papers, publication in the journals. But then with some surprise, because I don't know why Robert was not in the radar for the big names in safety. I don't know. I think you should be there, Robert, but maybe we can change it. So thank you for reaching out. Thank you for sending all the material, and thank you for accepting the invitation to talk with us about some general stuff in safety and leadership.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Hugo.
So, Robert, first of all, I want to listen a little bit about your background. So, you just made this question for me. I'm giving it back to you. So, how did you start to get interested about safety and leadership?
I come from a very non-traditional approach to this. I maybe everybody is non-traditional, but I was from a very early age. I've always been interested in how energy works, and not just energy on a physics level, like Einstein and things like that, but also within organizations, within relationships. And my view is that of Einstein's view. I corroborate that energy is all that matters. Everything, all matter is ultimately energy. It's just movement and flame is what he calls that. And so I got to an early age, I got into martial arts, internal martial arts, started that, and was for whatever reason drawn to that when I was probably 8 years old and started training and practicing. And there's different types of martial arts, but what I think of the internal martial arts are martial arts that have to do with direction of energy. It's not being there the fastest, the strongest, the quickest, the biggest. It's basically redirecting energy. And I've seen some amazing things that people can do with that. So I was actually, shortest version I can tell you was I was coordinating the stress management center of a hospital in Portland because I got my undergraduate degree, as I mentioned, in organizational development and leadership, and my master's degree in organizational psychology, industrial psychology. And again, I remember thinking when I studied the early ergonomists, Frank and Lillian Gilbreth, Frederick Taylor, who weren't even called ergonomists back in the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. They were dealing with things that made perfect sense to me. And they were actually dovetailed with my practice of internal martial arts, my beginning practice. So I started basically applying this to safety. And I was surprised to find out that applying to a conference that was just within the state that I live in, Oregon, in the West Coast of the United States, that there was a conference that I went to that was really close to the hospital in which I worked, and it was terrible. The things on safety were boring. It was people reading things. It was impractical. It didn't make any sense. It was very, follow these rules and blame people if they don't follow the rules. I'm like, that is really not smart. So let's go back to what you mentioned about your connection with Eduardo. And Eduardo, who I've not met in person, haven't worked with, but we have resonated and reverberated to similar writings that each has posted. And he made one of the classic statements I thought that really makes sense to me. He says, we have to stop treating people the way we wish them to be, and treat them the way they actually are. And that makes perfect sense to me. Is rather than it's just like martial arts. You can't say, well, you know, I don't want that strike to be in that direction. Or, no, I've only practiced on my left side, so you can't strike me on my right side, which, by the way, there are some martial arts that practice that way too, which is crazy to me. But, and so in the midst of that, I basically looked at this particular conference and I was kind of flabbergasted about how the level of safety and safety training was, I thought, really deficient and really boring and impractical again. So I sent a note to the people who ran the conference and I said, would you be interested in my giving you a proposal for something, for a presentation? And the short version was, I was teaching martial arts then, a jujitsu system, and I had my own ways of teaching people how to maintain their balance and how not to fall. And if they did fall, what to do. In fact, I used to teach falling methods to black belt conferences I was invited to. I was good at that, I guess, or some people thought I was. And so they said, wow, I'd love to hear something new and different, some trips and falls. So I was surprised it was such an issue. Went to the conference expecting to have like 15 or 20 people show up at this presentation, and like 300 people showed up. And I was just in awe and flabbergasted. And people started hiring me. And so the first article that I ever wrote was in the then called the American Society of Safety Engineers flagship journal called Professional Safety. I subsequently published over 90 more articles just in that journal. But the first one was in June of 1985 on motion training and analysis for the 1980s. Shows how old I am and how dated it is. I've updated that article since then. So basically, I started getting hired. We started working. And of course, what we do is we work in the areas of what we call personal injuries, which is slip, trip, and fall prevention, soft tissue injury prevention, strains and sprains, and hand safety. All things that are affected by at work and at home. And I have very strong opinions about what works and what doesn't. And gratefully, in many cases, they've been proven to actually make a difference with organizations with which we worked all over the world. Sorry
Yeah,
to take so long.
I've seen many companies worldwide. I had the opportunity to travel the whole world to talk about safety and to learn and sometimes teach as well. And most of the companies, they have programs for slip, trips, and falls and soft tissues protection, the hand protection. It's not something that we can call as something rare. But what's your idea about it? What do you bring from the table that is different from what we see over there that pretty much doesn't work? Because every year people are redoing this and we don't see better results, at least not the experience that I had the opportunity to see, and not only in Brazil, but everywhere.
And people I've had working with international companies, I've had many peoples in the safety profession say that subscription falls are a major problem and probably one of the most underreported issues in safety.
By far.
Because I wonder about how many people, and I've seen this with people and friends who fall down, they look around, they're just embarrassed. Like they think their first reaction is, wow, I hope nobody saw me. But that's,
And
and they
also on the
jump up.
street, in regular life, not only in the industrial environments, but I saw those days I live close to the beach and it was raining as hell. And then I was coming back from my hobby that is foot volley, and a lady like fell on the face on the floor, and she was like bleeding everything, and it was really serious. And I stopped my bike to help her, and she was trying to avoid me to help her because she was, oh no, it was nothing, but shamed a lot, you know. So a really nice catch you did now.
Yeah. And so most organizations approach slip, trips, and falls by trying to control what I call external factors.
Yes.
And basically, you make sure you clean up after yourself, use the right footwear, things like that
Hold
are
their
just
hand hail,
I'm sorry,
grab the hand hail.
use a handrail. Yeah. And even that, I can talk about how that's misplaced. And all over the world, I've seen that when I see stairs in industrial environments, and buildings, handrails often stop before the landing. And I believe that can be a slip, trip, and fall hazard psychologically, because what it does, if you, first of all, you can't hold on if you trip on the last step. Because I read a statistic somewhere that most staircase falls happen in the first two and the last two steps on the staircase, either going up or going down, mostly going down. But what happens is, if you, not only can you have nothing to grab onto, if there's no handrail that continues, but also it gives you the feeling out of the corner of your eye that you've reached the bottom step. And so that this potentially can become an issue in that. Our focus is, we think it's important to do all of the things that organizations are doing that you've talked about, and I've mentioned, and I've written a lot about this, about all the 7 factors, external factors to control subscription fall protection. But I agree with you, if it works, and I'm sure it helps, but it only helps to a certain degree, because as you've noted, Hugo, subscription falls still are a worldwide problem every single year. Nobody cracks it. And they keep doing the same old things. And someone said, I can't remember who it was. He says, the secret of success is simple. If you're in a hole, quit digging. Try something different, is my view. If something's not working, and what happens instead is most people go, wow, this didn't work. Let's redouble our efforts. Let's dig a deeper hole. We'll put in 3 guardrails. We'll put 3 treatments on the floor to make it less slip resistant. And of course, none of that helps people not fall at home. And when people fall at home, they develop habits, they get injured, which makes it more likely there's a kind of a cycle of if often people start losing their balance, and even if they don't have an impact, they have a bodily reaction. They can have a bodily reaction injury. They catch themselves, and in so doing, quote, throw out their back or their shoulders or their neck, which makes them more prone the next time, perhaps, if they start losing their balance. It makes it less likely they'll have the flexibility and the range of motion to catch themselves from not falling. So sometimes these things can have a cumulative effect. And psychologically, there's something called FOF, fear of falling. And I did not make that term up. In the United States, there's something called the National Library of Medicine, which is a database of studies by physicians, only basically geared for other physicians. So they're double-blind, very good studies. And they talk about, there's a lot of studies in there. If you go into so-called PubMed, PUBMED, if you say study, PubMed, fear of falling, you'll see a lot of research on that. People become afraid if they're going to lose their balance, and they walk stiffly, which makes you, unfortunately, ironically, more prone to fall. You're less likely to recover if you tighten up instead of being able to relax and make a movement and recapture your balance. So our focus is say, yes, do all of those things. Don't replace those, the external factors, but help people take better control of their own safety. And that's the watchword of everything we do. We have a thing I made up we call safer, stronger, more in control. Our main focus is helping people become more in control of their own safety. And in terms of martial arts, my view is that safety is the ultimate self-defense. Be able to protect yourself, not necessarily from another person. More people are much more likely to get hurt by objects or by making mistakes or missing something or running into things than they are, I believe, from another person in a fight, for example. Controlling yourself first is critical. So our focus is on mental and physical factors that help you become more in control. Everyone can learn to, so far we've seen, to improve their balance. Now, some people can learn to improve it faster and better than others, no question. But there are simple things that anyone can learn to do that I've seen that work over and over again. Include your range of motion. For example, your eyes have a strong force factor and contributor to your range of motion. And you can try this sometime. If you put your hand out, for example, and I basically look to the left with my eyes, it's opposite for you, of course. I'm looking in this direction, and then I try moving my hand to the right, and notice how far my hand will reach comfortably. Whereas instead, if I not even moving my head, I just look to the right with my eye, with the direction I'm going to go, before I move, and sure enough, most people find their range of motion improves. I read a physiology book in my graduate school that said your eyes direct control your musculature and your range of motion. So this is a factor also. So there's a lot of mental and physical factors, the laws of motion, for being able to understand that slips and falls are not caused by slippery ground or by objects on the ground, because everybody, I think, maybe has had the experience of walking along a slippery surface and skidding, losing their footing, but not falling. Somehow they were capturing their balance. So if that's happened to you, the question I ask myself is, why did I not fall? I mean, obviously, I lost my footing, I lost my grounding. Well, the answer, I think, and what I found is that people fall for one reason and one reason only. And that's because it has to do with vertical alignment and momentum, the interplay. That if I'm moving forward, and I start moving, and there's an object in the ground that either stops my foot or just slows my foot because there's a greater coefficient of friction, for example, or even a small object on the ground. And people usually trip not over big objects that are above your knee, but things that are ankle level below. They may not even notice. The elevators don't quite match up the threshold with the floor. Little objects in the ground, small things that just stop your foot momentarily. But if I'm walking forward, I've got forward momentum, and it's slow, even if it's even a small level, slows down my lower body from moving. My upper body has momentum. My upper body is no longer lined over my lower body. So that's why when we're walking forward, we generally trip forwards onto our face, like that woman did, perhaps. Whereas the opposite, if we're walking along and something takes our balance, where we walk on a wet leaf or slick ground or a piece of paper that is slick and slippery, and our foot goes out before our upper body gets there. Now our lower body is ahead of our upper body. And so now we slip backwards when we're walking forward. That's just because it has to do with alignment, the interplay of alignment and momentum. People can learn to be better aligned quickly. It does very little good to talk about this other than to engineers or safety professionals or ergonomists. So when we work with people, normal workers who don't care about all the mechanics and the intellectual parts about this, what they care about is, okay, how do I become stronger? How do I become more balanced? Because again, the greater your balance, the more potential adaptable strength you have. If I'm leaning forward a little bit, what that means is that I have to use an excessive extra muscle tension to prevent myself from falling. There was a medical doctor named Roger Sperry who won the Nobel Prize for brain physiology and medicine, and his work was on brain physiology. And one of his famous quotes, and this is not exact, it's a pretty good summary of what he said. He said, over 90% of the brain's activity is dedicated to maintaining your balance when you're on the move. Every time you move your hand, you move your head, the weight of your body shifts you, and it can affect your balance. And it's a complicated system inside of us that helps us keeping aligned so we don't fall. But sometimes that gets disrupted, and there are ways to regain that through training and practice. Athletes know this; they train and they get better at this. Martial artists learn it, and everybody to some degree. I'm not talking about becoming a black belt level or higher, but everyone can learn to improve their balance dramatically. So we talk about range of motion. We talk about improving that, how to use your eyes to lead your motion better, how to use the weight, positioning, the distance from what you're trying to reach and push or pull, do things like that. All make a difference. So probably again, long answer short, Hugo, but what we do differently is we think of a complementary approach to
Yeah,
all
this
the
is
physical external controls. I'm sorry.
totally new for me. I never heard anything in this direction before, on working on the individual, not in the behavior, but in the physical capabilities and things that we usually don't consider when we are evaluating events with uh, loss of balance or loss of strength or something like this. So really interesting approach, and I hope we can in another opportunity go go further on this, mainly for the viewers, because I'm pretty sure that it's going to be new for them as well. Usually, what everybody does is working in external stuff, and I think we have a lot of stuff, as you said in your answer, to do in the individual, because usually we try to point the fingers to them and say that they were unaware or something like this, but we can develop capabilities. I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner as well, so I'm make a lot of sense for me. Uh,
Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
yeah, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, yes.
Brazilian. Yeah. Yeah, I did not do Brazilian. One of my instructors did. I did my jujitsu background. I've trained more extensively in two martial arts. One is Shidari, Yanagi Ryu, Aiki Jujitsu. It's the Aiki Jujitsu system,
Mm, mm,
Japanese system. And the other system that I've trained in, and our director of training is, I think, is a master martial arts. I'm not a master martial arts. I trained for 40 years, but I can do some things. But he's a master, and our art that I've trained in more recently and more extensively for about 20 years is a Chinese art called Wing Chun Kung Fu. Again,
mm.
an eternal art where you're directing forces. But you know how, as a if you're doing a lot of my understanding of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, a lot of it is focused on ground fighting, working on the ground, if that's accurate.
Most of it.
And the other thing I understand, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm no expert in this, is that when I've talked to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighters, they'll often say that the person underneath is in a superior position, which is antithetical to what most people believe. Is that accurate,
No,
Hugo?
no, actually, there are two kind of preference. There are people
Mm-hmm.
that are better and comfortable being underneath. They know
Mm-hmm.
how to protect themselves underneath. They have more ways to finalize the opponent being underneath. They prefer, mainly when they are lighter in weight than it's better because they cannot handle the heavier people underneath. And there are
Yes.
others that prefer, but there is no clear answer for. If you ask me about the champions in recent championships worldwide, global class, the people above, they are taking advantage. They are stronger and they are taking advantage. But in the past, in the beginning, it was developed to weaker people being able to survive and to gain time and to protect themselves being underneath because they were smaller. They couldn't avoid being took down, So,
Mm-hmm.
but thinking about it in my trainings, there is a lot of stuff on balance, on being firm, on being stable, on if in one hand on the floor, one feet on the floor. So it makes a lot of sense to protect you from. If you are a fighter that prefers to be above, you have a lot of techniques to avoid falling, or being
Mm-hmm.
uh, put underneath. So now it makes a lot of sense for me because I trained this a lot of time, So, but I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to keep the whole conversation on this. So
A martial arts.
I
Oh,
want to
by
ask
the way,
you
if I may interrupt,
something about
I'm sorry, Hugo.
No, no. I just want to ask you about the scissors leadership style. That
Sure.
it's also something that probably many people didn't hear about. So if you can uh, talk a little bit about it.
Sure, absolutely. By the way, let me just sneak this in for you, is that a long time ago, I wrote a book that's in one of the languages it was translated into is Brazilian Portuguese called Martial Arts and the Art of Management. And it's probably out of print now, but it was basically utilizing martial arts principles in basic leadership. So, and it talks about, again, my view is that you can't do for someone else what you can't do for yourself first. Scissors leadership.
Yes.
Most organizations, in my experience, have a top down approach towards change. we believe, by the way, that it is absolutely critical if you're going to deal with the types of injuries that we deal with, which again, soft tissue injuries, strains and sprains, slips, trips, and falls, and hand injuries. These are things that people use their body all the time. They're creatures of habit, things that they have done not hundreds, thousands of times before, thousands of steps, maybe in a day, certainly hundreds of steps, but in their lifetime. One shot training from a management or saying, pay attention or something like that is minimally useful from our experience. Because especially because you're not even telling people, what does that mean? How do I pay better attention? Well, think before you act. What should I think about? I mean, this is the kind of stuff where you use the handrails. Well, what if the handrails, what if I'm in a place where there are no handrails? In the real world, people don't always trip and fall, for example, or have soft tissue injuries in excellent, pristine environments. They often do this where it's outside, at home, on the parking lot, anywhere in the field, where they don't have all the, the environmental controls that they can protect. And so, to me, having one-shot training is basically minimally useful when it comes to that you're trying to fix events that may occur from where people have long-standing habits and patterns of behavior and actions, mental and physical patterns. So once to sit there and have one-shot training on preventing slips and falls or soft tissue injuries, people go, oh, well, that's great. And they get back to work and the pressures of work intercede, get in their way. We think that you have to, if you really want to make a difference in safety in these particular injuries, you have to have a presence. It has to be embedded and imbued into your system. In the same way that I perhaps you'll agree, let me know if you do or don't, that in martial arts, you can't try to learn a technique to try to practice it the first time when someone actually attacks you. It has to be embedded into your system. So by default, when your adrenaline rushes, when things are not ideal circumstances, that you just reflexively come back to your baseline unconscious competent activity, if that makes sense. And so that's what we want to do with people. We want to develop habits effectively that are safer for people to rely upon, especially when it comes to soft tissue injuries, because many times soft tissue injuries are like cumulative trauma, like the straw that broke the camel's back. And people say, well, how did you hurt your back? I lifted the shirt off my dresser. What? A piece of paper off the floor. Well, it wasn't the weight of that paper. It was the constant movements over and over again that built up over time that weakened us cumulatively and progressively. So one of the things that we find is that if you really want to make changes in organizational safety with these injuries especially, you have to, one, give people the right techniques and skills that are practical, that they believe will work, that they're going to want to practice even on their own, and that they see that work for them. Number two, there has to be a system within the culture that it's reinforced continuously. So we developed something we call scissors leadership. Scissors change. So instead of many organizations, when they want to change an organization or a level of safety level of soft tissue injuries or slips and falls, it's like they try to do it top down. They bring out training, they come up with a video, and it's like taking a knife and cutting through a piece of paper going down. It can work for a while. Some organizations do the opposite. They say, well, let us instead, we'll start working from the bottom up somehow, and we'll train people to do something, and we'll disperse it to our line staff and our workers. That's like knife coming up. But the most effective way to create change, especially if this is not just paper, but it's thick cardboard that is resistant for it because of lack of trust in an organization or morale issues or just embedded habits that people have. It's two knives coming together of scissors. That's all scissors are two knives coming together so they both work together. So to me, scissors leadership and scissors approach to cultural change means simultaneously working top down, getting your senior management excited, at the very least, reduce their resistance, where we do have some champions from senior leadership You get their assent and their go ahead, not only resources, but they talk positively about something, they ask about it, and also from the bottom up. And so we spend a lot of our time practically. We do not do training any longer. We don't believe in it, partly because we work with large organizations all over the world, and we can't be coming back all the time to Sao Paulo or any place or Paris or anything over and over. It's not cost effective. So we believe is developing leadership from within. And same thing like mindfulness. I'm writing my current article I'm writing right now is another article on mindfulness. And I believe that you have to start from within as opposed to just looking outside of you. You have to be aware of what's going on inside of you first. Cognitive dissonance, cognitive biases, tensions that you have. And part of that is knowing you're feeling your own balance. And when you feel it, you can correct it with very small changes. Doesn't take much to do. So that's what we believe in. And we only at this point work with organizations where we train people, generally workers and some staff people within the organization to become agents of cultural change. We give them the tools to then first train their coworkers, their peers, second to coach. And we find that in real life, a lot of change in safety happens not just in a formal training session, but when people are in the lunchroom or the break room or walking to and from the company parking lot, and say, hey, does that really work? Or they're watching other people, things like that. Real change. That is what convinces people. There is recent studies in neuroscience that when people can basically make decisions for themselves, when they're self-deciders, they learn quicker and the learning sticks better. There are a lot of studies on this from Italy and neuroscience. I can send you some of these articles if you want. We've been doing this for a long time. We believe in helping people self-convince. And if they're not self-convinced, they're not going to change their deep inlaid habits because it takes energy to change that. But when they're excited, they see the value, then they go, oh, wow, I can't wait to show this to my family because the stuff that we do impacts not just people at work, as you mentioned, people at home and their family members and people they care about. And as people get older, they're more prone for lots of reasons to fall. And when people get hurt as they get older, one of the things that happens is the injuries last longer. They don't generally bounce back quite as quickly as the older we get. And there are changes mentally as well. So that's what we believe in and ardently practice. And that's what we do.
Wow, great answer. And again, another new concept that I think most of us can take advantage from this. So, Robert, unfortunately, the time flies really fast when we are having good conversations. I want to thank you so much for the explanations. I think we will have pretty much good stuff to share with us. Maybe we can reschedule another conversation for developing more. We also have some stuff that we want to do together. So everybody that is there, stay in touch. I want to thank you so much for your time and for your experience sharing with us. And this was a really uh, brainstorming stuff to us because usually we always receive the same stuff from different sources, and today it was totally different stuff that we need to think about and to include in our toolbox for facing the challenge that safety puts every day for us to face in our industries.
Thank you, Hugo. And I look forward to, I did so much talking. I'd like to shut up and hear you and learn from you too. So I look forward to further conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think I stopped it.